Good evening. My name is Sue Smerrick, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area covering all of Washtenaw County. I welcome you to tonight's Zoom forum featuring candidates for the United States House of Representatives, Michigan 12th District. The candidates will be on the general election on Tuesday, November 3rd. This year, the League of Women Voters is celebrating 100 years of expanding voter rights, educating voters, shaping and influencing legislation at the local, state, and national levels. We are pleased to sponsor these forums. The League is a nonpartisan civic organization that encourages informed and active participation by all citizens in government. While the League does not support candidates or parties, we do take stands on issues we have studied. One of the League's most important goals is to assist voters in making informed decisions at the polls, and thus we bring you tonight's forum. Our moderator this evening is Jeff Smerrick, who will explain the format and get us started. Jeff?
Thank you, Sue, and thank you everyone for joining us. And now it's my honor to introduce the two candidates running for the United States Congress 12th Congressional District, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell and Mr. Gary Walkowicz. Another candidate is on the ballot for this office, Mr. Jeff Jones. Mr. Jones was invited to participate in this forum tonight, but he is unable to attend. Welcome, candidates, and thank you for participating in this forum. The forum today will have this format. Each candidate will have an opening statement of up to 1 minute. Each candidate will have a closing statement of up to 90 seconds. In between, I will ask questions which came from the Washtenaw County community. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to a question. At appropriate times, a sign on the screen will indicate the time remaining. 30 seconds and then stop. If you have used up your time, you will be allowed to finish your sentence, and then your microphone will be muted so the other candidate has an equal opportunity to participate. The candidates will begin speaking in alphabetical order. Depending on the number of questions, all candidates will have an opportunity to be the first or last to answer the questions. And now to the opening statements. Congresswoman Dingell, may we have your opening statement, ma'am?
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening to everybody, although I don't know when you're watching this, so hello. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum and to 100 years of educating the electorate. This is an important opportunity for us to talk about issues that are on the minds of a lot of people. We're in the middle of a pandemic that has turned all of our worlds upside down. Too many have died, and literally millions of people are worried about their jobs, whether they can afford to go to the doctor, whether they can make the rent, their mortgage payments. We need to have honest conversations about what's happening in this country. We need to fight the fear and the hatreds dividing us, and to remember, we need to work together. Community is the strength of democracy.
Thank you, Congresswoman Dingell. And now, Mr. Walkowicz, may we have your opening statement, sir?
Yes, I would first of all like to thank the League of Women Voters for this forum and for the work they do. It's very much appreciated. And my name is Gary Walkowicz. I'm a recently retired auto worker, and I'm a candidate for the 12th Congressional District for the U.S. Congress in Michigan. The Working Class Party has been on the ballot in Michigan since 2016. And we are this year also on the ballot in Maryland. And we organized Working Class Party because we believe that the working class is not represented in the two major parties and needs its own voice in elections.
Thank you, Mr. Walkowicz. The first question starts, before I say that, we're gonna move to the questions. And as a reminder, I will be reading each question once, and it will not be repeated unless requested to do so. The first question starts with Congresswoman Dingell. For the last 100 years, the League of Women Voters has always advocated for access to voting. Today, there's widespread concern about the capacity of the United States Postal Service to deliver mailed ballots on time, concern about the integrity of absentee and mailed ballots, concern about legal disputes over who will be eligible to vote and voter purges, and concern about threats of voter intimidation. Just last week, Michigan Attorney General Nessel indicted 2 political operatives for intimidating voters with robocalls. And the president even recently told people to try to vote twice, which of course is a felony. What is necessary to ensure that every eligible voter can vote and have their vote counted?
Thank you, Jeff, for that question. First of all, the House of Representatives passed H.R. 1 addressing the protection of voting rights, supporting the post office, and a number of other actions that would have addressed all of the issues that you just mentioned. Unfortunately, it passed the House, has not passed the Senate. So here's the reality. We are going to have to, all of us, work to ensure that we protect the integrity of this year's election. U.S. House of Representatives has passed a bill to help support the post office. People in Ann Arbor, the Ypsilanti aren't unaccustomed or uninformed that the post office has been having issues these last few years. It is safe to vote by mail, but you should have gotten your ballot by now. If you haven't, you can go to your clerk's office and ask for it, but you should return it as soon as possible. If you're using the mails, you need to mail it at least 2 weeks before Election Day. But clerk's offices in all the Washtenaw County areas have the box outside. I voted today in mine in Dearborn that you can drop that ballot off. There are also teams of lawyers that are working to protect the polls on Election Day. There are election security teams. And all of us have a responsibility to make sure that we encourage everybody we know to vote, to turn out that vote. And if you hear of voter intimidation or voter suppression, there is a vote, a line that the League of Women Voters, I do believe, has on their site that you can call and report it. And we all need to have a responsibility, but the most responsibility to protect everybody's right to vote. And by the way, to vote. And the last thing that I would say is we need poll workers. We need people that can work on poll day. Many people, because of COVID-19, that have traditionally worked to polls cannot because of pre-existing conditions. We need to make sure we've got poll workers there. All of us have a responsibility to make sure Election Day goes okay.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And now, Mr. Walkowicz, same question to you. Unmute.
Okay, there we go. So I think it's very important that people make every effort to go out and vote. It's unfortunate that in this country, we've seen a history of people's right to vote being suppressed. You've seen that certainly in the Black populations down through history. The working peoples make it difficult for people to vote. And right now we're seeing almost, to me, it's almost a sabotage of the post office done for political reasons. So I think it's very important that people make their own efforts. We all, I also have a, we look at the voting system and democracy in this country is being run by and controlled by people with money. The amount of money that goes into elections really often determines who wins and loses elections, and it's the wealthy people who control the election process with their money. So people already are at disadvantage, working people are already disadvantaged when it comes to the electoral process. But in any case, for those people who want to have a voice in this election, I think it's very important to make every effort to go out and vote, to vote by mail-in if that is what best suits them, to make sure they vote early, to make sure that there's the best chance possible that we have a fair and accurate election count in this year's election.
Thank you, Mr. Walkowicz, and you get the next question. Michigan has some of the most deteriorated infrastructure in the nation. Considering the current COVID-19 pandemic, combined with the associated severe economic crisis, what do you see as the best approach for improving the quality of Michigan's and the nation's deteriorating infrastructure of roads, bridges, and other infrastructure?
It's very obvious to anybody that the infrastructure in Michigan and in this country is in very poor shape. And there's a reason for that. The reason is there have been decisions made, political decisions made in Washington and elsewhere to not fund infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, the water and sewer system, schools, hospitals. The money is actually that is there to pay for these things, which comes out of the tax money that working people pay, is often not sent to infrastructure, not used for infrastructure. It's given back to corporations. We have tax giveaways, tax breaks, tax refunds, tax subsidies that corporations get, and they've taken money away from what working people need. And so I think the money is there to pay to fix the infrastructure. Obviously, it's just a matter of using that money that is in the system and people pay taxes for to fix the things that need to be fixed in this country. And another part of that is to make sure that the corporations and the wealthy pay their taxes, which most of them don't. Donald Trump is an obvious example from just the past week, but it's across the board where corporations and the wealthy do not pay their fair share of taxes or much taxes at all, as well as getting refunds from taxes that they don't even pay in the first place. So it's getting that money back. And if we took that money and that money was used to fix infrastructure, we would also be able to create many jobs in this country, which are sorely needed right now. Good paying jobs, which could be created by putting together a plan to pay for the infrastructure and then put people to work rebuilding this country.
Thank you, Mr. Walkowicz. Congresswoman Dingell, you get the next question.
Thank you, Jeff. Many of the points that Gary made are very valid in terms of we've given very big tax breaks to the billionaires and to the corporations. But we also need an infrastructure bill in this country. Again, the House of Representatives passed one and the United States Senate hasn't. But if Joe Biden is elected president, that will be one of the first things that he does, to invest in infrastructure, which is not only fixing our roads and our bridges, but is also, as Gary said, fixing our sewer systems, our water, but also broadband. I mean, we've got Washtenaw County. People think of the Ann Arbor area as being one of the most technologically capable areas in the country, and yet broadband is a real issue throughout most of the country. So we need to ensure that we are investing in all of these infrastructure issues. We need to build an electric vehicle infrastructure so that we can support vehicles of the future. And in investing in these things, we will also be creating jobs. And as we create jobs, there will be more revenue. One of the other things that we're going to have to do when we get a president that doesn't roll back 100 environmental regulations and doesn't deal with these issues that we need to be talking about is because we have more fuel efficient vehicles on the roads, less gas tax, less revenue is coming in. So ultimately, as more electric vehicles are on the roads, we're going to find a way that we fund many of these activities. Roads and bridges should be through the gas tax and what replaces it, and many of these other infrastructures are going to need to come from other sources of revenue. This needs to be a top priority for this country. Third world countries are in better shape than parts of the United States of America.
Thank you, ma'am. And Congresswoman Dingell, you get the next question. Since January of this year, the COVID virus has killed more than 211,000 Americans and killed 7,163 Michigan citizens. In public, President Trump has downplayed the risk, although he and many other administrative officials have now tested positive for COVID-19. COVID infections continue to grow in most states across the country. What should the Congress and national agencies be doing this fall and winter to address this horrible health crisis?
This is a real health crisis, as you just spoke about. And unfortunately, in Michigan, the number of deaths have had a disparate impact on minority communities. When 13 to 14% of the population of Michigan are African Americans. 43% of the deaths have been in the African American community. We have been working nonstop. 4.5 months ago, the House of Representatives passed another package, the Heroes Bill package, which would have extended unemployment, given an additional $600 stimulus payment. It would have invested in more testing and tracing, which is absolutely critical, put more money into PPP programs to help small businesses. It would have given money directly to state and local governments, which desperately need it for the frontline workers of those first responders, fire, police, teachers. The Senate did not act on it for 4.5 months. We need a bill. People are desperate. There's rent and mortgage assistance in that first bill. So last week, Nancy has been negotiating nonstop. The House passed another bill that was $1 trillion less than the last bill that we passed, that had all of those things in it, that had additional dollars in it for independent restaurants, which are struggling, the airline industry, childcare. Childcare is a huge crisis in this country. Then the president got COVID. And I want to say that I wish the president of the United States would wear a mask. All of us need to listen to the scientists and the medical experts. They need to be driving what our actions are in this country. I myself got tested last Saturday and was negative, and I'm going to get tested again this Saturday, and we'll be transparent about what's happened. But we need to be leaders. We need to be leading on this. And then Nancy Pelosi worked all weekend with Secretary Mnuchin trying to get a compromise. Yesterday, the president said, we're not going to do it anymore. The Congress needs to pass legislation to help the American people who need help.
Thank you, Congresswoman Dingell. Mr. Walkowicz, same question to you. And we need to unmute.
You know, the response of the Trump administration has been beyond horrible. I call it criminal, and many people have died because the Trump administration has not done what could have been done to dampen the number of deaths from COVID. But the problem does not lie only with the Trump administration. Our public health system in this country was not prepared for this, and the reason we haven't been prepared, it wasn't prepared for this pandemic, is because for years and years, going back over many administrations, the public health has been defunded. Money has been taken away. People have been laid off in public health organizations at the national, the state, and the local levels. So our public health system was not able to prepare for this, not prepared to have the testing, the PPE, the contact tracing that was needed to help alleviate some of the deaths that we've seen from COVID. And also it goes beyond even, public health. It goes beyond we have many people who are dying because of underlying conditions. They're dying from underlying conditions because, first of all, our overall health system, public health system, and our total health system in this country does not do well for people, especially poor people and working people. We have an economic system that leaves many people in poverty, and again leaves them in a situation where their health is threatened. They develop underlying conditions, and thus are more susceptible to dying from COVID, as we have seen that where the deaths have been from people who were in the minorities from the working class. So it's really it's an overall problem that goes beyond the Trump administration, which is public health and the healthcare system in this country is lacking. It is well behind, despite the money that's spent, well behind the healthcare systems in many other countries.
Thank you, Mr. Walkowicz. And you get the next question. Today, many people are concerned about the fairness or unfairness of the United States tax code. Often, billionaires and companies making billions of dollars in income pay no tax at all. Yet everyday Americans pay a far greater percentage of their income in taxes. What should be done to address this?
Well, the thing that should be done to address it is to tax everybody as they should be. I mean, the problem that I see is that the governments, and again, I go beyond the Trump administration, the previous governments in both parties who serve really the interests of the corporations, and they write the tax laws to favor the corporations and the wealthy. And even the tax laws that are there are not even enforced for the people with money, because right now the IRS does more audits on people who are the lowest income rather than the highest income. So it's a complete reversal of what you should see. And I think working people in this country have the right to demand that everybody pays taxes, number one. And number two, the wealth that we create as working people should be used for us, because we should have a say-so over the wealth of this country is used. We should be able to decide where the money should go. And so it goes beyond even the tax system, but I think we live in an unfair economic system that favors the wealthy. And I think that's what the Working Class Party really tries to address in our campaign, is that the whole system has to be changed, and working people have the power to change that system.
Thank you, Mr. Walkowicz. Congresswoman Dingell, same question to you, ma'am.
The fact of the matter is that during the Trump administration, billionaires have gotten tax cuts, and the working classes, as Gary has talked about, are paying a higher share of taxes than they should. Also deeply disturbing is that in legislation passed under this administration, we have incentivized companies locating offshore or offshoring rather than keeping jobs here. I think that one of the things we must do in the next session of Congress, with hopefully others that will work with us in the House of Representatives, is to look at our tax policy, to look at what people are being taxed at what levels, to have the billionaires pay more of their fair share, but also how we use the tax structure to incentivize a number of things. One of the things that people, I think, didn't understand, for instance, when we talked about trade policy and NAFTA, which is something that I believe shipped many jobs overseas, was how we have offshored our supply chains. And yet suddenly when we had a crisis, the national stockpile did not have the equipment that it was said that they had. When we had frontline workers who were desperate for PPE equipment, we don't make it in this country. It was being made in China. We were having to send planes and inspect the quality of goods that we were going to send. We need to bring supply chains, not only in healthcare, in producing our medicines, but in manufacturing of all kinds of goods back to this country. And we need to use our tax system to incentivize returning jobs to this country, not encouraging companies to locate overseas.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And you get the next question. During this election season, there have been accusations of candidates not being truthful, engaging in politics of personal attacks, and an unwillingness to work with members of the other party to solve national problems. How important are integrity and character in our politics? And how can some level of bipartisanship be restored?
Well, I'm somebody that believes that bipartisanship is very important, that civility matters, that honesty matters. And that is something that I have practiced from the very day that I walked into the Congress. In my primary, my opponent made fun of me and said that there was no such thing. Well, here's the fact of the matter. Each of us has had different life experiences. We have different perspectives. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, that we need to listen to each other more and talk less. We're not perfect. We don't know everything. And compromise is not a dirty word. So I believe that we need to respect each other. We may not agree on everything, but we can agree in a civil way. Civil discourse is critical to this country. I think social media, which was started or founded so it would bring people together, has contributed to dividing us as a country and divided to hate and bullying and the lack of people developing relationships, which is also contributing to the lack of civility and respect in our society. So this is something that I believe in practicing every single day. I try to reach across the aisle. If I introduce a bill, I try to make it bipartisan, have people on both sides. I try to get co-sponsors from each side. because then it's a stronger piece of legislation, because both sides are invested in making it work. So I think one of the other things that you asked about was people not telling the truth. I am horrified at how lying and facts don't matter anymore. I think science and facts should be the basis of all the decisions that we make, and we need to ensure that they return. And I will make a promise that I will never lie knowingly, and that we all should be working towards that, and how we hold others that do lie accountable.
Thank you, Congresswoman Dingell. Mr. Walkowicz, same question to you, sir. And you need to unmute. There you go.
So I think that if you watch the political ads on TV, which you can't really get away from if you turn the television on these days, almost every ad you see is one candidate from one party attacking their opponent from the other party. They're talking about what is wrong with the other, what they haven't done or what they did do, and have nothing to say for the most part about what they are going to do. And I think that's why many people in this country are turned off really by the election process, and really with both major parties, because if you look at it statistically, there are more people who voted who chose not to vote in the last election. It's very likely to be the case in this election, who chose not to vote at all. Those votes are more than Republicans got, or more than Democrats got in the last election. And this has been growing over the years. I think there are many working people, ordinary people, who are disgusted with politics and disgusted with both parties. And I think that's one of the reasons you see the type of ads that are on TV, that because they're the parties, I don't really think have really proposals to put to people, to put to the voters, to say, this is what I'm going to do, so they're left with attacking the other party. And so I think the politics in this country is really not addressing the real issues that working people are facing. And I think that is what's needed. That's what the working class party tries to do. We don't have the money and the resources to reach as many people, obviously, but I think that's what is needed in this country, is when it comes to election, is to really discuss what are the real issues that face working people, face ordinary people, face poor people, and how are we gonna address those issues.
Thank you, sir. Now, both candidates, the next question will be the last question for both of you, and the first part of it goes to you, Mr. Walkowicz. As of October 1st of this year, about 13 million Americans are receiving unemployment compensation. They also have lost access to health care caused by their loss of employment. The White House is currently trying to invalidate the Affordable Care Act in court in the midst of the COVID pandemic. What should the United States Congress be doing to protect Americans from this healthcare disaster, from bankruptcies, and from COVID becoming a pre-existing condition, further limiting access to healthcare?
The healthcare system in this country is an embarrassment to the richest country in the world. And I think it, certainly we cannot stand for an attack to take away any more of the healthcare that we have. But it goes way, way beyond that. The healthcare system in this country is really, I'm not sure as broken as it were, because I'm not sure it was ever what is needed. We live in the richest country in the world. We spend more money on healthcare per capita than any country in the world, and yet the outcomes, the health outcomes for people, for ordinary people, we rank behind many countries in the world, even a country like Cuba, for example, countries that wouldn't even be considered the most developed countries. And I believe that the reason for that is, the main reason for that is, most of the money that is spent, or much of the money that goes into healthcare, does not go to providing healthcare. We have a healthcare system that is based almost totally on profit. Much of the money that is spent on healthcare goes into the pockets of the insurance companies, the drug companies, the hospital corporations, and I think that we really need a national healthcare system in this country. I believe that it's almost going to take a total change of the society to do that, because the society currently is so invested in the profits of those healthcare profit-making companies. That's going to take a real uprising by the working class to really change this. And again, the fact that we've had such a number of deaths from COVID, when we are the worst country in the world by far, despite the money that's spent here on healthcare. It's a total indictment of the healthcare system in this country, and that's why we need a complete and total change for a national healthcare system that provides every person in this country with good healthcare. There's no reason we cannot have it. The money is there for it.
Thank you, Mr. Walkowicz. Congresswoman Dingell, same question to you, ma'am, and you need to unmute.
I believe that if you live in America, that you've got a right to quality health care, period. We are the only industrialized nation in the world that does not guarantee all of its citizens health care. And as Gary said, we spend more money than any other nation, and our outcomes are far worse. That's just unacceptable. The Affordable Care Act did expand coverage to many people, but there's still 30 million Americans that do not have coverage, and another 40 million Americans that cannot afford their co-pays or their deductibles. And how many people can't afford their medicine? When you look at the medicines that the president got when he was in the hospital, which, by the way, I think the president of the United States should have access to the medicines that he needs. But remdesivir, which is one of the medicines that he received, which initially was being managed by the federal government, October 1, became available to all hospitals that are treating patients. But the cost of it is $3,200 a treatment. How many people are going to be able to afford that? Whose coverage is going to cover that? And then we do talk about what this administration has been trying to do, which is to undermine the Affordable Care Act from the day that they walked into the White House. They're going to be in the Supreme Court the day after this election trying to rip the protection that people with pre-existing conditions have. Every American's got a right. I am a Medicare for All person. I'm co-sponsor of the bill in the House, and I'm going to fight tooth and nail until we get it in this country. We do have a broken, fractured healthcare system. And I want to be honest, until you are really living in it, unless you're someone that doesn't have insurance or you're a senior and you're in a very broken long-term system, you don't realize how bad it is. We have a moral obligation to give every citizen in this country access to quality health care, period.
Thank you, Congresswoman Dingell, and thank you both candidates for your excellent answers. And now it's time for the closing statements. We'll begin with Congresswoman Dingell. May we have your closing statement, ma'am?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with everybody tonight. We talked about a lot of issues that are on the minds of all of you. Didn't get to a lot of them, like the environment. If you live in Washington County, you're worried about the plume, you're worried about PFAS, you're worried about Line 5. We are worried about COVID and how it's turned our worlds upside down. Too many people, your neighbors, your friends, your colleagues, or yourself are worried about whether your job is safe, you may have already lost your job, and how you're going to live. You're worried about how you're going to keep a roof over your head and take care of your family. Could you potentially be evicted? How are you going to make your mortgage payments or your rent payments? People are really worried about childcare, the school systems. How are they going to make sure that their children are being educated? We have so many issues that we need to work together on, and together is the operative word. We've had so much drama this last 4 years. This presidential election is the most important election of our lifetime. I hope for young people, it's the most important they have during their lifetime. But if you care about what's happening in this country, if you care about whether it's being divided by fear and hatred, that we're being pitted against each other, I beg you, please, the most important responsibility you have as a citizen of this country is to use that vote, to vote. So thank you for listening to me. Thank you for caring about the issues. And please, Election Day is November 3rd. Between now or that day, please vote.
Thank you, Congresswoman Dingell. And now, Mr. Walkowicz, may we have your closing statement?
No, working people in this country are facing a crisis. It's been a long-standing crisis, but it's gotten worse with COVID and the resultant loss of jobs in this country. But the issue of jobs, of low wages for working people is something I wish we had more of a chance to talk about tonight. But that's what we try in Working Class Party to address in our campaign. You know, and I think the most important thing that we want to say to working people is that, you know, historically, it's not been elections. In fact, it's been social movements that have led to change in this country, a change which is badly needed. If you look at the civil rights movement, the labor movement, the women's movement, it was movements like these that really affected change in this country. And I think that's what we have to look at and understand today. You know, working people, laboring people, we create all the wealth in the society. And every dollar that's spent up there on Wall Street and speculated by the hedge funds really started out as something that was wealth that was created by a person working on an assembly line or teaching a child in a school. Everything that we do, it creates the wealth of this country. And I think working people have the right to say this wealth should be used for our benefit and to create a better society. And so we, you know, the main point we try to make in our campaign when we talk to working people is that we believe that the working class has the power to change things and to create a better society.
Thank you, Mr. Walkowicz, and thanks to both of you for participating in this valuable session. I'll now turn this back over to Sue for our closing comments.
The League thanks the candidates for participating in tonight's forum and to those who contributed questions. All our candidate forums will be available for streaming on your computer or smartphone. Go to our website, lwvannarbor.org, and look for the link to the programs. In addition, the forums can be viewed on the Community Television Network. Please urge your friends and neighbors to watch the forums as well. For additional nonpartisan information on candidates and ballot issues, go to vote411.org. The League's voter resource guide covering local, state, and federal candidates and current proposals that will appear on your ballot. As a reminder, all voters can cast an absentee ballot. With the changes that have been created by COVID-19 and confusion regarding voting procedures, the League encourages you to vote as soon as possible when you're comfortable and feel you're knowledgeable about the candidates and ballot issues. The most important thing is to vote in the general election on November 3rd. Good evening.